Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.
Well, happy fucking Ramadan, everyone. It's been a while. And of course, we're all back to talk about the religion of peace, once again. And the wonderful cultural enrichment that it brings us, which oddly enough always seems to ramp up around the time of Ramadan. And while I'm at it, a very special Allahu Akbar to our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, who for some reason sees it his duty to continue to legitimise this deplorably retarded ideology.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. And very good evening to all of you gathered here tonight on this very special occasion. I am honoured to be the first Australian Prime Minister to host an iftar during the holy month of Ramadan.
More Islamic appeasement funded by the Australian taxpayer. Halal caterers brought in special crockery for Malcolm Turnbull's Ramadan feast because guests refused to eat from plates previously used by non-Muslims. Well, isn't that wonderful? I mean, here's Muslim community leaders setting an example for how Muslims should integrate and showing some of that tolerance that the members of the religion of special needs are constantly demanding from everyone else. But you know what would be just awful? If something were to go wrong with this little publicity stunt. I mean, that couldn't happen, right? Because Malcolm Turnbull only invited the most moderate of Islamists and apologists. Like the Grand Mufti, who's published some very moderate things in the past. He's claimed the West does not bring us any good. All they bring are their diseases, their designs, and their shortcomings. Described homosexuality and lesbianism as sexual perversions. Said Western women who don't wear Islamic coverings are exposed as a piece of sweet pastry. And of course blames terrorism, like the attack in Paris, on Islamophobia. Then there's Yasmin Abdel Majid, who just the other day was on ABC The Drum telling us all how great Sharia law is. These wonderful Islamic laws she's an advocate of have killed millions of innocents. The Sharia is very clear about many things. Death is the punishment for leaving Islam, death is a punishment for homosexuality, etc. Look at the countries that have fully implemented Sharia and you'll notice they are some of the worst countries in the world to live in. These are not free countries, they're complete shitholes because they're governed by the very same theocratic fascist laws that this Islamist woman seated right next to the PM advocates for. And look around the room, do you know what the hijab represents other than a shitty male-dominated culture with pathetic men who have no self-control? It represents support for Sharia. Try finding a hijabi here who'll condemn Sharia. Good luck with that. But the media have only picked up on one Islamist at the event, Sheikh Shady.
On the line from New South Wales, the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. Good morning.
Good morning, Neil.
Thanks for your time. Do you regret inviting Sheikh Shady to the dinner?
I do regret his being invited. He was invited in his official capacity as President of the National Imams Council. If I had been aware that he'd made those remarks about homosexuals and gay people, he would not have been invited.
Well, yeah, but I've only been speaking just a short while ago to a man who was also a leading Muslim, President of the Lebanese Muslim Association, Samir Dandan, who said that what the Sheikh was saying represents the teachings of Islam. Now, have we got a fundamental clash of values here?
Well, Neil, I don't want to buy into a theological debate, but what was drawn to my attention was statements that it was alleged that he had made to the effect that AIDS was a divine punishment on gay people, and
the adulterers should be stoned.
That was not drawn to my attention, but that is.
Well, look, do you mind if I just play you what he said, because we have it on tape, and
okay.
Maybe I'm misrepresenting it. This is what he said.
Maybe, yeah.
The punishment of zina, the punishment of those who commit zina, if they've never been married before, they'll be lashed 100 lashes. And if they are married while they committed the zina, or previously been married and divorced, and they committed zina, then their punishment is stoning to death. So it's not a small thing.
Zina, of course, is adultery. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that's the first time I've heard that, and that is obviously completely and utterly unacceptable. I condemn remarks of that kind. They have no place in Australian law and Australian culture. We are a nation governed by Australian law, and the overwhelming majority of Australians would, like you and me and like your listeners, condemn them.
And if you want to go a little bit deeper, you could look at where he's getting these views from. They're straight out of the Islamic text, because this is Islam. Tell me, Malcolm, did any of these moderate Muslims you invited at any point in the evening approach you and say, this sheikh has ties to radicals, he's made absurd comments about gays and adulterers? No. But maybe no one was aware of him, right? He's only the head of the National Imams Council. Even now, not one of these people have condemned him. No one's called for him to step down, because once again, the so-called moderates won't do anything to oppose those pushing Sharia. This should speak to the problem that we have. Many Muslims hold these views that are at odds to our values.
But this is part of the problem, and this clash of values. Is Islam a homophobic religion?
Well, Neil, I don't think you can generalise. Islam is a religion of about which.
Oh, Malcolm, we don't need to generalise. Let me help you out. About 1.6 billion is the line you're looking for. Not realising we also have stats that give us insight into what that 1.6 billion believe. Islam is without a doubt a homophobic religion. We can prove it with empirical data. The texts condemn homosexuality, and here are polling results from around the Muslim world, showing that hardly any Muslims think homosexuality is morally acceptable. But this has been our Prime Minister's approach for a while. On some level, I don't think he really believes in what he's doing, but nonetheless, he's trying to pander to Muslims, and he's going to a lot of effort. You don't see him go to this effort for atheists or Buddhists or Hindus or any other group in society. There's no good reason for a secular leader to be pandering to a small group of religious nutters like this.
I want to reiterate something that I said to the Islamic Council of Victoria in March, and that is to emphasise to each and every one of you that the Australian Muslim community is valued and respected.
Perhaps he thinks it'll reduce the ridiculous problems that we've been having with this particular religion. But we've been pandering to Islam and pretending everything's fine for years, and that hasn't worked. It's only gotten worse.
And it is not confined to a narrow security prison. You are an integral part of an Australian family that rests on the essential foundation of mutual respect and understanding. Every one of us is enriched by the culture.
Why yes, Malcolm, we are culturally enriched. Just ask Europe. Look at this, they are culturally enriching the shit out of that place. And of course, time after time, we still hear, Islam is such a peaceful and beautiful culture. What? No, I haven't read a word of the Quran and I don't know anything about Islam, but I watch Smart Muslim Man on TV and he told me Islam good.
You're helping ISIL.
One of the solutions to combating attacks and avoiding the atrocious mess that Europe finds itself in is to not let Islam expand in its current unreformed state. Because there is no situation in the history of man where an increase in Islam has brought anything but suffering for non-Muslims. And so that's why countries have border protection to stop psychopaths entering. You need to filter out the bad eggs to prevent people's lives from being ruined, which Germany and Sweden have failed to do.
Hundreds of women were sexually assaulted by gangs of migrant men in the German city of Cologne. There are now 55 declared no-go zones in Sweden where police have to escort ambulances to ensure their safety.
I think it's better if you go in without us, because I think it would be...
very aggressive.
Yeah, if
okay.
we're young. So we will stay here, and if it is...
That's fine.
You watch us.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Majority here are Muslims from East Africa, and they don't assimilate well.
Let's look back at how some of this was sold to us. Remember the photo of the lifeless child on the beach? It turned out that was not the fault of the West and had nothing to do with the war in Syria. Him and his family had been living in Turkey, and he died because of people smugglers. But by then the media had moved on. We had activists in the media pushing propaganda photos. Oh, look at this. This is horrible, the way the West treats innocent refugees. Oh, there's footage of what really happened? Uh-oh. They told us this was about helping children. Then we started to realize there weren't many children.
This is the reality of the camp. All men on their cell phones that are all not from Syria. They're all from Sudan and Afghanistan. And this is what the media will show you. The 3 kids at the camp. Like, the only kids I saw.
We started to see immigration hotspots become less and less safe. Young girls told to cover up or they'd be attacked by migrants. Here's a map of rape crisis centres in the UK. Now here's a map of areas where Islam is most prominent.
Appalling abuse of at least 1,400 children raped, trafficked, beaten and sometimes doused in petrol. The inquiry says almost all the perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage.
As these problems started to grow with more immigration, the local population started to think, Maybe there's been some irresponsible decisions made here, and maybe this won't end well for us.
1,000 men with origins in the Middle East and Northern Africa gathered, threw fireworks into the crowd of Germans to cause confusion, and then formed into smaller groups and surrounded women. More than 500 complaints have been filed. Initially, German police covered up the fact that it was primarily migrants who were the perpetrators. Here's the amazing thing though. When it comes to cover-ups, Sweden is way worse. German police was criticized because it took them a week to inform the public about the sex attacks. But Swedish police knew for 2 years that immigrant gangs were sexually harassing girls at a music festival for young people called We Are Stockholm, yet they didn't say a word about it. Instead, their report to the public was that it was a calm gathering that went fine.
Blatant failures by both the police and the council to stop the abuse. And she said clear evidence outlined in 3 separate reports was disbelieved, suppressed or ignored.
This is a betrayal of the people, and it's been facilitated by the government, the media, and a culture of weakness and self-hatred, which is unfortunately also present here in Australia.
And I think that in many ways we are inherently racist.
That's why if things are allowed to get that bad here, I'm sure we'll see the same level of cover-ups and apologetics. Here's more of those regressive pieces of shit perpetuating that same weakness and self-hatred now.
No violence, no justice! No racist justice! No violence, no justice! No racist justice! No borders, no justice!
And what they're chanting there is no borders, no process I believe, and no racist tosses. And oh boy, it's anonymous. They don't forgive, they don't forget. But they do look at Muslim countries and Europe, at the rape epidemic and the problems they're having with extremism, and think, yeah, we want more of that here, and we also want to have no control over who enters our country and how many. On the other side, there are parties who, in response to what's going on, want to protect our borders and be more selective about who gets waved in. One is called the Australian Liberty Alliance. Now, I'm not really going to talk about them per se. What we'll look at, though, that's of interest is one of their policies and the reaction to it on a current affairs show.
First, Angry Anderson is running for the Senate as a member of the Australian Liberty Alliance party. But Angry's been criticised for supporting the party's plan for a moratorium on Muslim immigration.
They propose a break from Muslim immigration to get ahead and deal with the Islamic problem we have now. I imagine the idea is to root out extremism and have a less fanatical Muslim community. While you're doing this, you can't be importing more extremism, more proponents of Sharia, because that will undermine your efforts and allow the problem to grow out of control. Still, even if you don't have more fundamentalists coming in and poisoning the well you're trying to purify, it'll still be a challenge given the Muslim community's opposition to reform. We've all seen how they react to people like Maajid Nawaz. He's one of those moderate Muslims supporting theocracy and trying to call Maajid an extremist for defending secularism.
Do you support secularism?
Do I need to?
Because you said it's extreme. You said I'm the other end of the extreme.
No, I'm talking about the way that you present yourself as though you are the only acceptable form.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm asking if you're saying I'm the other extreme. I'm asking if secularism is the other extreme.
Comes with a different narrative or a different point of view.
Is secularism the other extreme? Is secularism the other extreme? Because you just said I'm the other extreme.
You definitely only believe in one way of a government, only believe in secularism, or only believe that there should be, definitely there's no room for theocracy. That is what you said, no room for Islamism. That is correct. So what I'm trying to say is that there doesn't need to be that limitation. I mean, if you're talking about violent extremism, that's one thing. But if you're talking about people who have a belief in a certain way of government, then what is the issue there?
Surely you agree theocracy is wrong. Surely.
Do I need to? Do I need to agree that it's the...
Moderate as fuck. And furthermore, we don't have any Muslim figures like Maajid here to set an example in Australia. But aiming for reform is still a better option than sitting back and bringing in more people with incompatible views.
As a budding politician, Angry is a frontman for a controversial political movement. But it's his radical views on Muslim immigration that have hit a very sour note. Are you a bigot?
No.
Are you a racist?
No.
Are you xenophobic?
No.
Hey, how would you like thousands of people from the worst cultures and areas on Earth in terms of freedom, in terms of how they view gays, women, secularism, democracy, etc., who all in one way or another adhere to a Stone Age fascist supremacist ideology preached by a murderous pedophile flooding into your country? Now, most of them are men of military fighting age, have little to no work skills, can't speak English, and don't have any identification or available background information. But don't you want to be culturally enriched? What about your family, your children and their children? Don't you want them to grow up with this vibrancy? No, what are you, a racist, a bigot?
Angry Anderson says it's all about liberty.
I will fight. I will truly stand by my fellow Australians and fight to defend our rights and our liberties. I won't do it with the sword or the gun, but I'll do it with what I have.
Look, to be honest, I thought angry is angry, but I never thought angry is stupid.
We can be vegan!
Unfortunately, these are the people who want to use all their energy to divide us as a society.
Have you ever noticed how Muslims and regressives use this stop trying to divide us rhetoric to dismiss any issue? If you criticize Sharia, if you criticize Islam, basically if you're being a bad infidel and not doing what they want, stop trying to divide us. We need to come together. Bring in thousands more Muslims. I know we have problems now, but I assure you, all your problems will disappear once you just have more Muslims in your country. And the best thing about the stop trying to divide us response is you can use it for anything because it's not addressing what someone's saying, it's just an appeal to idiot masses suggesting they shouldn't listen to that person.
You say that you won't cause any harm, but are you concerned that with everything that you're saying, you're not going to be inciting hatred, you're not going to be inciting intolerance and inciting people to commit violence against Muslims?
The footage that's being shown right now is not even footage of violence against Muslims. In fact, we've already had a look at some of this footage.
No violence! No violence! No!
This group fucking love Muslims. They love to get into punch-ups with police and others, and they love to wear face coverings and commit crimes. This is an example of two groups of idiots who repeatedly show up and fight each other. In fact, if there's one group that are more likely to initiate violence, it's the side who love Islam. Oh, by the way, there are some Muslims here. Look at those poor, defenseless, peaceful Muslims. They don't look like they came to fight at all. I sure hope no one attacks them when they're punching people's heads in. Angry is not saying attack Muslims. No one's saying that. We're talking about immigration policies here, designed to protect people. I'll show you what inciting violence looks like. We just had a sheikh who was preaching for the death of homosexuals at Orlando Mosque, here for Ramadan, hosted by the Imam Hussein Islamic Center.
There's nothing to be embarrassed about this. That death is the sentence. With homosexuality the same. Out of compassion, let's get rid of him now. Because he's contaminating society.
We have the head of the National Imams Council in Australia preaching stoning for adulterers, who was invited to dine with the Prime Minister at his house. The PM can't even find Muslims who don't hold atrocious views for his bullshit photo-op dinner. But tell me all about how immigration policies are somehow a call to violence, you fucking cretin, while Islamic leaders in Australia are literally preaching for the death of innocent people. Now I know this and all the mindless refugees welcome bullshit can make people feel worn down, and so I'll leave you with something a little positive. Here, based on a poll they ran under the story, most people in one way or another seem to support the response of tougher immigration. Now this is an early screenshot, but the poll reached around 7,000 votes with 95% voting yes. And I'm seeing from a lot of sections on the internet that could only be described as left-wing or moderate to left-leaning, people are talking about this issue, and more importantly, they're aware of what's going on, to some extent. They've seen the 60 Minutes report, you know, they've read about Cologne. These are average people on the left, who like me have figured out that Islam and this sort of immigration sort of flies in the face of their progressive values. Hopefully this becomes more and more mainstream. And with any luck, those pushing for open borders and this type of immigration will also be forced to defend and justify its consequences. Good luck making a case for why this is acceptable and worth people's death and suffering in an honest discussion. Oh, and there's another little bit of good news that'll be a perfect way to end this video. Congratulations to our friends in the UK for voting to claim your independence and leave the EU. And all of you fucking regressives, no one's buying your shit anymore. Your time is over. Eat a dick, Merkel.